بارے دیگر صلوات اللہم صل علی محمد و آل محمد. بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم. الہاکم التکاثر حتی زرتم المقابر کلا سوف تعلمون ثم کلا سوف تعلمون کلا لو تعلمون علم اليقین لترون الجحیم ثم لترونها عین اليقین ثم لتسألن یومئذ عن النعیم. صدق اللہ العلی العظیم. اللہم صل علی محمد و آل محمد. خیال فاطمہ دی کی ہے آبرو زینب. خیال فاطمہ دی کی ہے آبرو زینب. علی امام کی سجدوں میں آرزو زینب. خیال فاطمہ دی کی ہے آبرو زینب. حیضے سے زینت اجداد یہ سے یکتا ہے تو نون سے یہ نبوت کی محسنہ ٹہری. جو بے کے راز کو کھولوں تو بے علی مولا تھی. باب علم کی بیٹی معلمہ ٹہری. مثال فاطمہ زہرا ہے ہو بہو زینب. خیال فاطمہ دی کی ہے آبرو زینب. مجھے حسین کی بے مثل سجدگاہ کی قسم کہیں نہ ہوتی نماز و قرآن کی باتیں. منا تو لات کی پوجا بحال ہو جاتی. نہ کوئی کہتا دہر میں ایمان کی باتیں. سنانے خطب جو جاتی نہ تو بتو زینب. خیال فاطمہ دی کی ہے آبرو زینب. عجیب عالم غیبت تھا شام میں لوگو. رسم قید تھی بالوں سے منہ چھپائے ہوئے. چہار سلط سے ہونے لگی تھی سنگ باری. ہوئی جو داخل بازار سر جھکائے ہوئے. بچاتی دین کو ہو گئی لہو لہو زینب. خیال فاطمہ دی کی ہے آبرو زینب. جناب سید سجاد ایک دن اپنا قدم اٹھا نہ سکے، یوں شمر گھوڑے کو لہراتا گیا یکدم، حرم ضعیف کو ملعون سے بچا نہ سکے، عجیب یاس سے تکتی تھی چار سو زینب، خیال فاطمہ دین کی ہے آبرو زینب، دیار غیر میں توقیر پردے داری کو علی کی بیٹی نے کچھ اس طرح سجایا تھا، بنایا بالوں سے پردہ تو صرف خاک شفا، زباں پہ لہجہ شیر خدا سجایا تھا، علی کے لہجے میں کرتی تھی گفتگو زینب، خیال فاطمہ دین کی ہے آبرو زینب، صلوات۔
ایک اور بلند ترین صلوات۔ باد حسین کس نے کہا، حسین کس نے کہا میں یتیم ہوں، ارے زندان سے آ رہی ہے صدا، جو ہے وہ ظلم کرتا ہے مجبور جان کر، ارے شاید یہی ہے میری خطا، بابا کے ساتھ گھومنے پھرنے کی عمر تھی، بابا کے ساتھ گھومنے پھرنے کی عمر تھی، ہر ایک خواب میرا، میں یتیم ہوں، رو کر کہا سکینہ نے لاش حسین پر، شمر سے کانوں پہ ہاتھ رکھ بولی سکینہ شمر سے کانوں پہ رکھ کے ہاتھ گوہر نہ چھین بہر خدا میں یتیم ہوں سر رکھ دیا سکینہ نے زینب کی گود میں سر رکھ دیا سکینہ نے زینب کی گود میں رکھنا پھوپھی خیال میرا میں یتیم ہوں میں اپنے آنسوں سے بجھا لوں گی اپنی پیاس میں اپنے آنسوں سے بجھا لوں گی اپنی پیاس دریا سے لوٹ آؤ چچا میں یتیم ہوں باد حسین کس نے کہا میں یتیم ہوں محمد وآل محمد صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم
رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أفوض أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ونعم المولى ونعم النصير. والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. وقل رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتاب الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والشعراء يتبعهم الغاوون ألم تر أنهم في كل واد يحيمون وأنهم يقولون ما لا يفعلون إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وذكروا الله كثيرا وانتصروا من بعد ما ظلموا وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. زينوا مجالسكم بالصلوات على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل. For the love of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And for the hastening of the reappearance of Imam Sahib al-Asr wa Zaman, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. My respected elders, brothers and sisters in Iman, salamun alaykum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Question. What is the relationship of Islam and poetry? Keep that question in the back of your mind. We have been discussing in the previous night, we're continuing this discussion of last night. And last night we got to the point where we were discussing this concept of what is the future of our community and the future of our generation. And we said that this is what we'll be discussing in the subsequent nights, tonight as well as the following nights. That if we want a successful community, not only 5 years, 10 years, but 50 and 100 years down the line in this part of the world, we need to start planning for that. If I want to establish a business, if I want to, for example, go through med school, I have to have a plan for these things. Someone, for example, if they want to go through med school, they will say that first I have to plan for 4 years undergrad, then 4 years med school, then at least 3 years residency, if not more. If I build a business, I have to have a 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year plan. Otherwise, how am I going to get funding? It won't happen. That's the first thing they'll ask you for. Analogously, for our lives, we need planning. The same way for our institutions, for our madrasas, our Husainiyats, our Imam Bargahs, our masajids, we need vision. We need plans. Where are we going? What's the future going to be like? And in subsequent nights, I will share with you what has happened to other communities that have come here before us. We mentioned, and I will briefly recap for those who may not have been, that there are certain things the Ahlul Bayt have told us. And we introduced a concept called Ta'arrub Ba'd al-Hijrah. This idea that I leave a place where I'm able to practice, and I go to a place where I'm no longer practicing my faith. This is something the Ahlul Bayt have told us is a major sin in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then we said there's an exception to this. The exception is if your life is on the line. If you are being target killed in Pakistan, for example, or in Iraq, or some other country for that matter, you have the permission and the right to move to save your life. But only to the extent that it saves your life. That means that it is, even if you have to go to a remote village, you should do that. Because environment, Islam says environment has an impact on you. Where you live, where you sit, where you stand, the people you spend time with. As philosophers Nietzsche and others have said, that you don't need to tell me what your thoughts are. You don't need to tell me what you're thinking. Simply tell me your friends, your associates, your society, and I will tell you what your thoughts are yourself. We are products of our environment. This is what philosophers have said. This is what sociologists have said. Islam also recognized this. Islam said that we don't live in vacuums. Our society has impact on us, number one. By the way, I don't want anyone to get the presumption here that I am giving any type of indication to go pack up and go home. For many of us, especially us who are born and raised here, this is home. Where are we going to go? You can't go back anywhere. This is where we are. But within this environment, in this place that we live, we must establish certain things. Therefore, we mentioned certain values. We mentioned last night, we must pass on certain values, such as, last night we said, respect for parents. It must be established. Islam has established this. It is part of the ethics and the culture of Islam to respect the parents. That's why, for example, one of the things that we do on Shabeer, Jum'ah, Thursday night, is remember our loved ones. Our parents who have passed away, our grandparents who have passed away, our loved ones who have left this world. We remember and we commemorate them. This is part of the culture of Islam. We must establish that and make sure it continues in a strong path. The next level of discussion that I want to begin tonight is how do we establish this culture of Islam? Because Islam understood that we do not live in vacuums. What do I mean we do not live in vacuums? We live in a society. The scholars have said it was not a coincidence that Islam came in a particular time and space in Arabia. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, why didn't He send Islam to Jakarta in 1995, for example? There was a hikmah, there was a wisdom as to why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent Islam 1400 years ago to Mecca, to Rasulullah during that time and era. It's a very long discussion as to why. The scholars have commented on this. Environment has an impact. So we need to recognize that, number one. Number two, when we go forward to build the culture of our religion and our faith in this part of the world in particular, in the West, in America, in Canada, and UK, we need to start thinking about how we can do that. One element and one question that comes to the minds of many young people who are growing up in the West is, what is Islam's relationship, for example, to poetry? For example, when we start the Majlis, we start with a salam or a marsiya, for example. We start with poetry in honor of the Ahlul Bayt. When we are ending the program, when we are ending the majalis, there is a nawha, a lamentation, a matam that happens in honor of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Even many times during the majlis, the speaker will recite poetry. The question that comes to mind, is this purely cultural? Is this something that our culture has created? Or is this something that Islam has actually hinted on? Therefore, the question is, what is Islam's relationship to poetry? And what does that mean for me as a Muslim living in Orlando, Florida in 2019? Is it something cultural? Is it something that has a religious basis? We have to answer this question. And if it is something that Islam is against, we must stop it. And if it is something Islam is in favor of, we should establish it. Therefore, I want to look at what is poetry, first of all, and how powerful it is. What does the science say with respect to this idea? What are some other religions, what have they said about poetry, and have they utilized poetry or not? What does the Quran al-Majid wa Furqan al-Hamid tell us about poetry and the poets in the 26th chapter of Surah Shu'ara? Furthermore, what have the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam told us in their ahadith about the concept of poetry? And who were, if there were any poets of the court of the Ahlul Bayt, who were they? And who were those members of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam who were conveying poetry after Karbala and during Karbala to you and I? And what was the tragedy of Karbala? This is what we will cover in the brief moments we are together, inshallah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. When the ulama look at human beings, they define human beings. In the Hawza al-Miyah, for example, the scholars say, in Qom or in Najaf, the definition of a human being is haywanun natiq, the animal that has the ability to reason, the animal that has the ability to comprehend. The difference between you and I is that animal, which is the cow or the whatever creature you can think of, that animal has the ability to act on instinct. The ability to act on the fitrah that Allah has given the animal. Whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you and I one step further than this. When you look at the human mind, there are certain systems. The human mind is an amazing thing. There are systems. For example, there's the ancient brain, which is also called the animalistic brain or the reptilian brain. This is a very ancient brain that we have in common with other creatures, such as reptiles and other animals. It is the small region in the brain. Some scientists have called it system 1 of the brain. Then this front part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, this part of the brain is what makes us human. It is what gives us the ability to create buildings, to do mathematics, to solve some of the biggest problems in the world. This is why human beings have come forward and built institutions and established things in the world that other creations have not. Therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us this ability. If we use this ability to reason, we can become better than the angels. And if we do not use this concept of reason that Allah has given us, we can become worse than the animals. Not to say animals are bad. Animals are there working on their fitrah. They're working on their nature. They're not endowed with reason. We are endowed with reason. Therefore, people who are experts in communication, they said there are a few forms of communication. To convey what is in our mind, to communicate with others to see as to whether we have an idea, how do we communicate that? One form of communication is what is called prose. Prose. Nasr. There's another form of communication called poetry or shi'r. When we look at shi'r in particular, poetry, it has happened in every single major language. And it is something that is completely and very powerful, the impact of it. If you don't take my word for it, I'll share some research from you. At Bangor University in Europe, they did a study looking at the impact of poetry on the human mind. So they did an EEG test. They had hooked up and wired up the brain to see what's going on in the neural circuitry in the brain and what is the impact of the recitation and the hearing of poetry. when they put all this equipment on the heads of these subjects of the study, the EEG showed interesting results. It showed that when they were listening to poetry, and you know in poetry, in Shairi, in poetry there's a punchline, the end of the verse, the main line, you know the bayt that they say in Urdu poetry. That line, when it is recited in English or in any other major language, it releases a burst of neurons in the human mind. That they're saying that this is something that has a huge impact on the mind. Furthermore, research at the Max Planck Institute in Europe looked at, is there a physiological impact of poetry on the human body? You know, the body's response to listening to poetry. They told the people in the study, we're going to give you a button. You press this button when you feel a tingling sensation in your back. You know this tingling sensation you feel in your spine when you hear poetry? They said, we want you to press the button as soon as you hear it. The researchers said they all pressed the button when they heard it and they felt a shiver in their spine. But what the researchers said was interesting was that 4 seconds before they touched the button, they had already begun to experience the power of that verse. Therefore, science is telling us that poetry is very, very powerful and can have a tremendous impact on our lives. But the question remains, what does Islam say about this? What does our faith say about this? Because I cannot just come forward and say whatever science says is good. There's an interesting book, you may have read it, it's very famous by now. It's called Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari. It's one of the most popular books, a history of mankind. And in that book he says a very interesting concept, Mr. Harari. He says that we many times say religion follows the money. And history has shown there has been tradition, there has been some truth to this. But he says many times we don't look at how much science follows the money. He says history shows that science has followed the money for a very long time. If you want proof and evidence of this, it was in all the press. 1967, it was on NPR, CNN, all the major outlets. In 1967, it was just released a couple of years ago. In 1967, the sugar lobby in America, in the United States, paid off researchers at Harvard Medical School to say what? They said, we don't want you to research the negative impact of sugar on the heart, on the cardiovascular disease. We want you to focus on fat. This is happening 50 years ago on our watch. The idea is research and science has always been following special interests. You look at research groups in psychology, for example, in, for example, pharmacology, you will find all of this data very clear. We need to look at what does Islam say. That's what we need to look at. Furthermore, other religions have also looked at this concept of poetry and said it's very powerful. The Psalms, you know, Zabur, which we call Zabur, the Psalms, which the Jews believe in, they have poetic verses within the Psalms. Even Arastu, who I mentioned last night, Aristotle, who some of our scholars in the Hausa in Qom believe is a possible prophet, candidate for a prophet, because we don't know all the names of the prophets. And they teach his teachings in the Hausa, Aristotelian logic and his philosophy. He believed in God. He said, his quote, not mine, Aristotle, Arastu is saying that poetry is more important than history. It's more philosophical than history. Why? Because he has to give a dalil, he has to give evidence. He says because history deals with the particulars, poetry deals with the universals. Therefore, we need to look at this. By the way, this will come up over and over again, tonight and then the next night. History. Amir al-Mu'mineen in his wasiyah to his son Muhammad Hanafiya, he says, my son, study history. Amir al-Mu'mineen has divine knowledge. He has no need. He's telling for you and I. He says, my son, study history. He says, I studied history up until the point it was as if I was walking amongst the ruins of past civilization. You know, archaeologists, Asar-e Qadima ke Mahirin, the people who are archaeologists, they go and they study what was there before, the ancient Egyptians, fossil evidence. Amir al-Mu'mineen saying, study history. Why? Because history is bound to repeat itself. If you're interested, there's a very interesting book called Generations. It talks about how every 80 to 90 years history repeats itself in America. If you look at the Great Recession that happened 2007, 2009, where everyone's 401k declined, if you look at the numbers, roughly 80 years back, Great Depression. This Islamophobia that we're facing today, the Islamophobia in Europe, in America, in India, you have the far-right Hindu nationalists, Modi and the likes, BJP parties. 1850, 2 cycles ago, 80 years to 90 years, then one other cycle, 80 to 90 years, the exact same thing happened in the world. There was this wave of nationalism and this fear of immigrants. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, study history, because the answers to your problems are in the pages of history. It's a nasihah for you and I. Therefore, our scholars study this concept and they invite us to teach it. What does the Quran say with respect to poetry? Please listen very carefully to the verses I'm about to share with you, and do not conclude anything until I've completed. The Quran al-Majid, surah number 26 of the Quran, the entire chapter is called Ash-Shu'ara, Surah Ash-Shu'ara, the poets. Allah dedicated a whole chapter. The last verses, verse number 224, 225, 226, and 227. Because many youth come forward and say, oh, is this Marsiya? Is this Islamic? Is the Nauha Islamic? Is the Salam Islamic? Is the Shabedari Islamic? Is this something that's just cultural? I'm giving the answer here. The Quran says, surah number 26, surah Shu'ara, verse 224. Quran, وَالشُّعَرَى يَتَّبِهُمُ الْغَاوُونَ أَلَمْ تَرَ أَنَّهُمْ فِي كُلِّ وَادٍ يَحِمُونَ وَأَنَّهُمْ يَقُولُونَ مَا لَا يَفْعَلُونَ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَذَكَرَ اللَّهَ كَثِيرًا وَانْتَصَرُوا مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا ظُلِمُوا وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مَنْقَلِبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ. What's the Quran saying? وَالشُّعَرَى يَتَّبِهُمُ الْغَاوُونَ. The Quran says, the poets, only those who have gone astray follow them. Only those who have gone astray follow them. وَالشُّعَرَى يَتَّبِهُمُ الْغَاوُونَ أَلَمْ تَرَ أَنَّهُمْ فِي كُلِّ وَادٍ يَحِمُونَ. And they only go about into valleys that have no meaning. They go from one valley to the other without any purpose, without any meaning. Quran. They just go one valley and they're talking about love or some other concept, and they go to another valley and they talk about something else. The Quran said, no purpose. وَأَنَّهُمْ يَقُولُونَ مَا لَا يَفْعَلُونَ. And why do the poets, Quran says, why do the poets say the thing they don't do themselves? Why does the poet? وَأَنَّهُمْ يَقُولُونَ مَا لَا يَفْعَلُونَ. Why is the poet writing something and they're saying something and they're doing something else? Meaning, this sort of munafiqat, this sort of hypocrisy in the life of the poet. But the Quran doesn't stop here. 3 things the Quran objected on with respect to poetry. وَالشُّعَرَى يَتَّبِهُمُ الْغَاوُونَ. Those who have gone astray follow the poets. And the ones who go in, their poets are the people who go in one valley, other valley. There's no purpose in what they're saying. And why is it that the poets, they say one thing, they write something else, they do something else? There's a hypocrisy in what they say and what they do. But the Quran does not stop here. The Quran gives a very important exception. إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَذَكَرَ اللَّهَ كَثِيرًا وَانْتَصَرُوا مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا ظُلِمُوا. The Quran says what? إِلَّا الَّذِينَ, except who? إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, those who believe. وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, and do good deeds. وَذَكَرَ اللَّهَ كَثِيرًا, and they say Allah's name in abundance. They use Allah's name a lot. And وَانْتَصَرُوا مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا ظُلِمُوا, and they write poetry after they have been oppressed. وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مَنْقَلِبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ. What many of the scholars say after they recite the Majlis, that Allah will not leave the zalimeen, the oppressors. He will take revenge on them. He will take revenge on the zalimeen. Therefore, we got a principle in the Quran. In general, the Quran is against poetry, because poetry does not have meaning. The poet has hypocrisy in what he says. Those who have gone astray, they follow the poets. They go in valleys without purpose. And furthermore, there is the contradiction between what they say and what they do. But the Quran said a very important exception. It says, except those who believe and they do good and they use Allah's name in abundance and they write poetry after they have been oppressed. What firqa, what sect, what people on this planet who are there write poetry after they have been oppressed? If you read the history of Tashayyu, of Shi'as, from Abu Talib up until the modern times, up to Sibt Jafar, this is us Shi'as who have been writing for the oppressed. If you read the history of Shi'as, throughout history, many people say, what is the proof of the dalil of the iman of Abu Talib? If you want to give anyone to an answer, don't go into a long discussion. Just tell them, read the poetry of Abu Talib in honor of Rasulullah before he died. That's your evidence of the iman of Abu Talib. Who would write poetry for someone who is against, he doesn't believe in? Abu Talib is the first maddah of Rasulullah. He's the first person to write poetry in honor of Rasulullah and Islam. You don't need to go very far. You find the principle within that idea. Therefore, we understood, if poetry is done for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is done for Rasulullah, it is done for the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, and it is done for those who have been oppressed, that is good poetry in the eyes of Islam. And we must make sure that we pass this further. Furthermore, we are told that there are traditions from the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam that have told us the importance of this concept. We're told Abu Harun comes to our sixth Imam, Sadiq alayhi Muhammad, Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi. He says, Abu Harun, do you know the fadila of someone to write one verse of poetry in honor of Sayyid al-Shuhada, in honor of us, and make people cry? Do you know what it is? He says, Abu Harun, if someone writes one verse in our honor and makes 50 people cry, فَهُوَ فِي الْجَنَّةِ, that person will be in Jannah. Imam didn't stop there, huh? Imam said, furthermore, he says, Abu Harun, not 50 people, 40 people. فَهُوَ فِي الْجَنَّةِ. If 40 people cry on that verse of poetry, you'll be in Jannah. He said, Abu Harun, no. 30 people cry, فَهُوَ فِي الْجَنَّةِ. He said, Abu Harun, not 30, 20, 10. To the point that the Imam said, one person cries, فَهُوَ فِي الْجَنَّةِ. Imam's taking the zamana. That if you recite and you write poetry in honor of the Ahlul Bayt, one verse, it could change your taqdeer, it could change your life. In another tradition, this Imam said the exact same thing, but at the end he said, not even one person, if you make one person not even cry, you make one person make a sad face. That's enough. فَهُوَ فِي الْجَنَّةِ. Therefore, you and I must revive this tradition. Who were those people who were the poets of the court of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam? Were there people who were writing poetry in honor of the Ahlul Bayt? I said number one was Abu Talib. There is no doubt in history about this. Abu Talib was writing poetry in defense of Rasulullah and Islam. Who else? We're told that, when Saqifa happened, when Amir al-Mu'mineen's right was usurped, at that point in time, there was an individual by the name of Abdullah ibn Abi Sufyan ibn Harith ibn Abdul Muttalib. Not that Abu Sufyan, huh? Harith was the brother of Abu Talib and Abdullah. Therefore, he was the uncle of Rasulullah and Amir al-Mu'mineen. He was not in Medina when Saqifa happened. He came. When he heard what has happened, he began to write poetry. He said poetry extemporaneously. He said poetry off the cuff. He said poetry right away. He says, I am astonished that they have taken Khilafah away from Banu Hashim when Abu Hassan is amongst them. Referring to Amir al-Mu'mineen. He says, I am astonished that they took Khilafah away from Banu Hashim when Abu Hassan is amongst them. And he continued, was there anyone who prayed to your Qibla first? Was there anyone who prayed first to your Qibla? And was there anyone who knew more about the Quran and the Sunnah? He's saying, he's giving dalil. Why did you pick this person? The person who you should have picked is Abu Hassan Amir al-Mu'mineen. He was the first person. Second, the poet of the Darbar of Rasulullah. Who was that person? That person was Hassan bin Sabit. Hassan bin Sabit is considered the poet of the court of Rasulullah. Hassan had written much poetry. In fact, he was at Ghadir. If you want to know what Mawla means, Man kuntu mawlahu fahada aliyun mawla. What many people have come forward and say, oh, Mawla today means friend. Mawla is just friend. If you want to know what does Mawla mean, you can simply read the poetry of Hassan bin Sabit. He said very clearly that he said, congratulations to you, O Ali. You are the Mawla and the Hadi. He uses the word Hadi and the Imam of the people. Do I use the term Hadi and Imam, guide and leader, for someone who's just a friend? That means that he knew what the meaning of Mawla was very clearly. He said it in the poetry. Hassan bin Sabit. Rasulullah said to Hassan, he said, Hassan, your words are not your words. Your words are the words of the angels. And when you write, it's the malaika writing. As long, keep this point in mind, as long as you write in our honor. History said Hassan, after Rasulullah died, he began to write for some other individuals who are not worthy of praise. Rasulullah said, as long as you're writing for us, your words are blessed. Hassan bin Sabit, he has a role. Furthermore, when we go during the times of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, Aba Abdullah al-Husayn, Sayyid al-Shuhada, salawatullah wa salamu alayhi. Aba Abdullah, during his travels from Mecca to Medina, from Medina to Mecca, and from Mecca to Karbala, he had recited poetry throughout the way. Even on the way, on the day of Ashura, you will remember. And his final moments, he remembered the Shi'as. He said, my Shi'as, remember me when you drink cold water. He said this in lines of poetry. Bibi Zainab, Sayyida Zainab was using poetry after Karbala to convey the message so people would understand and remember what was happening. That shows us that the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, who knows the Quran more than the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam? No one. This Quran is Samit, Quran is Natiq. They understood this concept. Furthermore, we go to the time of our fourth Imam. During the time of the fourth Imam, the poet of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam was Farazdaq. You will remember there was a moment in time where the Imam, our fourth Imam, he is trying to go for ziyarah, tawaf of the Kaaba. At that same time, Hisham is there, the ruler of Banu Umayyad, the Umayyad ruler. Hisham wants to go to Hajr al-Aswad so that he can kiss the stone. Nobody is giving Hisham way. You know, sometimes you think you have honor, you have pride, you have respect. Nobody's giving you respect, no one's giving you space so that you can go. At that point in time, we were told that Hisham, he didn't get any space. A few minutes passed. The whole crowd began to split for one individual. It was our fourth Imam. He began to go straight to the Hajr al-Aswad. He kissed the Hajr al-Aswad at that very moment in time. At that point in time, they began to ask Hisham, nobody gave you space. Who was this person who as soon as he came, everyone parted and he went straight to Hajr al-Aswad? Hisham became arrogant. Hisham says, I don't know who he is. Farazdaq was right there, the poet of the Ahlul Bayt. He says, you don't know who he is? He checked him right there. He says, you don't know him? وَالْبَيْتُ يَعْرِفُ وَالْهِلُّ وَالْحَرَمُ هَذَا التَّقِيُّ النَّقِيُّ إِن كُنْتَ جَاهِلُ. He says that you don't know him. If you don't know him, the haram knows him. The land you're walking on knows him. هَذَا التَّقِيُّ النَّقِيُّ. He is the one who is taqi and naqi. He is the untainted one. إِن كُنْتَ جَاهِلُ. If you are jahil. He told him this whole entire poetry in honor of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. They took Farazdaq, they imprisoned him. They took him straight to jail. When they took him to jail, at that moment, when the news reached our fourth Imam, when the news reached the Imam alayhimus salam himself, he sent 10,000 dirham to Farazdaq, and he said, Farazdaq, this is our gift to you. The answer for many people, should we give Hadiya, should we not? These Noha Khan, Marcia Khan, these issues that are arising in our world, in Europe, in America, Canada. Imam gave 10,000 dirham. It's not 10,000 dirham today, huh? That's a huge amount. For us, there will be hundreds of thousands. But look at Farazdaq. The Imam said, give those people who are the shairs. The shairs of the Ahlul Bayt, give them. The Imam said, through his action. But look at Farazdaq. Farazdaq said, Yabna Rasulillah, I did not write this for any money. I wrote this poem and I said this poem because it is haqq. It is the truth. I didn't say this for any wealth or anything like this. He says, Yabna Rasulullah, I have no need for this. The Imam, when he got this message, he said something that is the manhaj of all of the Ahlul Bayt. You'll read their history and you'll find it. He says in response to Farazdaq, he says, Farazdaq, what we give, we never take back. We the Ahlul Bayt, once we give something, we give it for all time. We never take it back. This was the position of Farazdaq. We go further during the time of Imam Baqir, salawatullah wa salamu alayhi. Imam Baqir, the poet of the court of the Ahlul Bayt during the time of Imam Baqir was Kumayt al-Asadi. Kumayt al-Asadi, he wrote a poem in honor of the Imam, of the fifth Imam and the Ahlul Bayt during Hajj, when Hajj was going on. When Imam Baqir received news that Kumayt has written poetry in honor of the Ahlul Bayt, Allahu Akbar, may Allah give anyone the ability that the Imam al-Zamana does dua for someone like this. Historians said, Imam Baqir, during Tawaf in the Hajj, he turned towards the Kaaba. 3 times he said, Allahumma arham Kumayt, Allahumma arham Kumayt, Allahumma arham Kumayt, Allah have mercy on Kumayt, Allah have mercy on Kumayt, Allah have mercy on Kumayt. When Kumayt wrote this poem, we're told that he was in prison. He went to jail just like Farazdak. They took him to prison. When they took him to prison, the same way his father did, Imam, our 4th Imam, he sent 10,000 dirham for Kumayt al-Asadi. At that point in time, Kumayt got the money and he said, Yabna Rasulillah, you know I didn't write this for some money. I wrote this because this was haqq. I wrote this because this was something that is the truth. But Kumayt was smart. He said, Yabna Rasulullah, I know that you won't take it back. He said, Yabna Rasulullah, take it back, please. He said, you know, once we give, we don't take it back. At that point, he said, Yabna Rasulullah, if you're going to give me something, please give me your shirt. Give me one of your shirts, because that will benefit me in the dunya and especially the akhirah. That's what will help me more than anything else. The Imam gave and sent one of his shirts for Kumayt. Kumayt al-Asadi, the poet of the court of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. We go further, the 6th Imam's time. The poet of the court of the Ahlul Bayt was Sayyid al-Himyari. Sayyid al-Himyari wrote many poems in the honor of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. You want to know the power of this poetry and how the Ahlul Bayt look after their poets. Kumayt was during the 5th Imam's time. Sayyid al-Himyari, when he was dying, they say Sayyid al-Himyari was very fair-skinned and he was very handsome man. He would become old. When he was on his deathbed, when he was dying, they say there was a black spot that came over his forehead. This black spot began to spread. When Sayyid al-Himyari was dying, there were people who were his friends and there were some munafiqeen who were also with him. You know, the people who they come meet you, they say Salamu Alaikum, behind the scenes they do other things. They were munafiqeen. This is what historians said. Those munafiqeen were there. They began to smile. They said, this Sayyid al-Himyari is not a good person. It's clear, he's dying. Black spot is covering his entire face. When the black spot began to cover his entire face, Sayyid al-Himyari faced towards Najaf and he said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, is this how you treat your maddah, your poets? He said it again, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, is this how you treat your poets? He said it a 3rd time, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, is this how you treat your poets? At that point in time, everyone who was there, they said, we saw that a white dot appeared on the forehead of Sayyid al-Himyari. And that white dot began to spread across his forehead. And it began to spread across his entire face. Up until the point that he said, La ilaha illallah, Muhammadan Rasulullah, wa ashhadu anna aliyan waliyullah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa alihi. He said that the people who have the tawfiq to say this at the last moment, it's a big tawfiq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they said that with this whiteness illuminating his face, they knew that Amir al-Mu'mineen had did his karam on Sayyid al-Himyari. Furthermore, as you know, the 7th Imam was in prison for most of his life. He was in prison. When we come to the time of the 8th Imam, Imam al-Rida, the very famous poet of the Darbar of the Ahlul Bayt, Da'bal al-Khizai. Da'bal was the very famous poet who wrote poetry in honor of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. You will remember that Da'bal, he came towards the Ahlul Bayt and he came towards Imam al-Rida alayhi salam. And then they had a majlis. And you know, Da'bal would sit on a chair while the Imam himself sat on the floor. Meaning that there was some etiquette that the Imam had given the poet for the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. And Da'bal began to recite his poetry. The poetry that you'll remember that the family of the Imam, they fell unconscious when they heard. So Da'bal was the poet. Who was another poet? Ibn Sakit. Do you remember Ibn Sakit? Ibn Sakit was the person who was the poet during the time of the 10th Imam, Imam al-Hadi alayhi salam. Ibn Sakit, he's the tutor of the children of the Abbasid Khulafa. At that moment, this arrogant Khalifa, he comes forward and he says, Ibn Sakit, can you tell me, are my children afdal? Are my children better? Or are the children of Ali ibn Abi Talib better? Ibn Sakit was a follower of the Ahlul Bayt. He was a poet and he caught Jalal. He became very upset. He says, you're asking me that are your children better or the children of Ali ibn Abi Talib? He says, your children are not even better than the children of Qambar, the slave of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Allahu Akbar. To say that to a zalim ruler is the most difficult thing. It's very easy to listen to. It's very difficult to do. They took Ibn Sikit and they took his tongue and they cut it out. The same way, you remember Maysam at-Tammar. These people paid a big price. Remember, I mentioned last night, and I repeat tonight, this madhab came to us through big sacrifices. It was not easy. It was Ibn Sikit giving blood, Maysam at-Tammar giving blood. But remember, the Ahlul Bayt's zikr can never be diminished. The poet says, Faraz dar se misam bayan dete hain. Faraz dar se misam bayan dete hain. Rahega zikr Ali hum zuban dete hain. Faraz dar se misam bayan dete hain. Rahega zikr Ali hum zuban dete hain. This is the poets and what they've done. Therefore, you and I, we must come forward and we must teach our next generation to write in honor of the Ahlul Bayt. You pick the language. In Urdu, when you come to the subcontinent, the work of Mirza Dabir and Mir Anis cannot be neglected. We must understand. By the way, these were masterpiece works not only of Islam, these were mastery works of Urdu Adab. When you study, for example, Urdu at the master's level, you must study the works of Mir Anis. Not necessarily for religious purposes, but what he has given to the Urdu language. Therefore, these are people, by the way, do you know, roughly 150 years ago, this is when Mir Anis was alive and Mirza Dabir were alive, Majlis used to be them sitting on the mimbar reciting the poetry in honor of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. The Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam zikr continued through this. But you and I must make sure that we help give rise to a new generation that is able to keep the zikr of Muhammad and Wali Muhammad further. That will happen in English. That will happen. English is an old discussion by now. I think we have to work on Spanish now. Another language. If you look at the history of Tashayyu, especially those who are Sadat and even Ghair Sadat, if you look at the history, they were first in, for example, Arabia, especially those who were Muhajir, those who were migrating. What happened? I mentioned the history of Baghdad last night, where people were butchered, massacred, left, right, and center. And they fled. That's why there were Shias in Uzbekistan. There are Shias in Kazakhstan. I'll mention that in the future night. There are Shias all throughout Iran. There are Shias then they eventually came to the subcontinent, India and Pakistan. There was heavy persecution that was happening to them. But when they were leaving Arabia, they themselves, they prided themselves. Do you know how much the Arabs prided themselves on their language? Do you know how much they prided themselves? Do you know how they had divided the world? They had divided the world into Arab and Ajam. What does Ajam mean? Mute. Someone who's not able to speak. Yani, if you are either Ahl Zaban, you either spoke Arabic or you didn't. And if you didn't, you are mute. This is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the miracle of the Quran. Ibn Sikit asked the Imam. He asked Imam Hadi, the same poet I just mentioned, whose tongue was cut. He said, Yabna Rasulillah, why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala send different miracles for different prophets? For Musa alayhi salam, he sent magic. For Isa alayhi salam, he said medicine, bringing the dead back to life. For Musa, he gave the staff. He gave the asa. For Isa, he brought the dead back to life. For Rasulullah, he gave him the Quran. How is it? Why is it? What's going on? At that point in time, we're told that the Imam says, very good question, Ibn Sikit, the answer is the following. During the time of Musa, it was the time of magic. This is what people were entrenched in. This is what everyone was focusing upon. They were focusing upon magic. Therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Musa his asa, his staff, that it was greater than magic. That those magicians, when they threw their ropes, the historians have said, it was possibly ropes that were dipped in mercury. And they gave the illusion that they were moving. At that point, when Musa threw his staff, his asa on the ground, the Quran says, فَأُلْقِيَ السَّحَرَةُ سُجَّدًا, that all of the magicians fell into prostration. And they said, آمَنَّا بِرَبِّ مُوسَى وَهَارُونَ. We come and we bring faith on the Lord of Musa and Harun. They knew that this is something that is bigger than us. Imam says, we went further to the time of Nabi Isa. It was the time of medicine. Everyone was focused upon medicine. Everyone was focused on that. Allah gave Isa the miracle of medicine, but what was greater than medicine? He says that I will give Isa the ability to bring the dead back to life. And the doctors knew that this is not our position. We can give medicine, we can give advice on diet, but bringing the dead back to life, this is not our job. Therefore, they understood that this is greater than us. During the time of Rasulullah, why this idea? During the time of Rasulullah, it was the time of adab. The Arabs were so entrenched in poetry and literature that they used to put the sab'a mu'allaqat on the Kaaba. These were the best verses of poetry that had been written. There was a poet by the name of Shasha. Shasha, he would not come out of his home except once a year, because he did not want to talk to the normal people, because he did not want his language to become bad. He did not want his language to be affected. By the way, they say Mir Anis used to do the same thing, to keep his poetry solid. Nonetheless, Shasha, he came out, once a year he would come out. He came to the Kaaba. When he came to the Kaaba, he went and he looked at all the verses there. All the verses. Up until the point that he got to one verse, they had put a verse of the Quran on the Kaaba. Shasha, who never said anything, he said one statement. He says, Ma hadha kalamul bashar. These are not the words of a human being. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, if you want, and He gives an open challenge. He says, if you say this is the words of a human, then bring one verse according to the Quran that's equal to the Quran. You can't. In Arabic, in English, in Urdu, there are two categories. There's sha'r and nasr, right? Poetry and prose. In Arabic, there's three. In Arabic, there's sha'r, there's nasr, and there's Quran. There's poetry, prose, and another category called Quran. It's another category of adab. The very famous translator of the Quran, Muhammad Marmaduke Pickthall, he converted, he became a Muslim. Many of you will know his name. He said a very famous line. He says, neither poetry nor prose, but a unique fusion of the two. That's what the Quran is. The Quran has the capability of both. Therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Rasulullah the miracle of the Quran because the Arabs were entrenched in poetry and literature. But Ibn Sikit asked a beautiful question to the Imam, and he did us a huge favor. He said, Yabna Rasulullah, what is the hujjah of today? He said, that was the hujjah of Musa's time, Isa's time, Rasulullah's time. He said, what's the hujjah of today, this era and this time? The Imam said the hujjah of this era and this time is aql, reason. Allah has given you the tools to be able to deduce what is true and what is false. Therefore, we must use our reason in light of what our scholars and our ulama have told us. By the way, many of our big ulamas wrote poetry. If you read, I mentioned some poets yesterday. Allama Zishan Haider Jawadi, you'll remember in the subcontinent, I already mentioned Mir Anis and Mirza Dabir. I don't know if you know this history about Mirza Dabir and Mir Anis. They were actually, in their right, they were scholars of Islam. And I've heard from scholars that you cannot find one bayt of Mir Anis that is against Quran or Ahlul Bayt. He was reading the Quran and he was reading the traditions of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. The idea was these were also ulama, but we don't see them as that. They were scholars in their own right, but we don't see them as such. In fact, this is what they say about Mirza Dabir. Dabir was someone whose language was more Farsi than Urdu. It was more difficult. That's why he didn't become as famous. But he was more in terms of ilm, they say maybe he had more. Nonetheless, this is a separate argument. With us, we must look at what is our future trajectory. Where are we going? Allama Tabatabai wrote extensive poetry. It's very well known. But others say, they say he drained his poetry into the river. He didn't want people to know him as a poet. Sayyid Khomeini wrote poetry. Many others, scholars, big time scholars wrote poetry. If many of you remember Rashid Turabi, Allama Rashid Turabi, he wrote poetry extensively. These ulama were writing poetry extensively because they understood it had a huge impact on the soul. We're told there's a moment in time where Allama Tabatabai, he goes to sleep in the middle of the night. When he goes to sleep in the middle of the night, he sees a dream. Allama Tabatabai is Sahib Tafsirul Mizan. He sees a dream. In his dream, he sees Amir al-Mu'mineen. When he sees Amir al-Mu'mineen, he says that Amir al-Mu'mineen said, call all of the Arab poets. And he called all the Arab poets. The Arab poets began to recite poetry in honor of the Ahlul Bayt. Furthermore, as time progressed, then he said, call the Persian poets. The Persian poets came and they began to recite their poetry. Amongst the Persian poets, Amir al-Mu'mineen in the dream, Allama Tabatabai says, he says, call the poet Shahriyar. Where's Shahriyar? At that point in time, Shahriyar comes and he begins to recite a poem. Ali ay huma ya rahmat. This is the first line of the poem. And he begins to write it, and he begins to write it, and he begins to recite it, and recite it, and recite it. Up until the point that what happened was that he finished the poem and Amir al-Mu'mineen blessed him. The dua for him. Allama Tabatabai woke up. The next day he began to ask people in the morning, do you know a poet by the name of Shahriyar? They said there is one poet who's Azeri. His name is Shahriyar. He's not as known, but he's there. Shall we call him? He said, call him. When Shahriyar came in front of Allama Tabatabai, at that time Allama Tabatabai said, can you please recite your poem that begins Ali ay huma ya rahmat? Shahriyar became astonished. He says, how did you know I wrote this? He said, why? He said, I wrote this last night. I finished writing this at 11 p.m. last night. Allama Tabatabai was not long ago. Allama Tabatabai died in 70s roughly. 80s. He says, I finished writing this at 11 p.m. last night. How do you know? I didn't tell anyone about it. He says, Amir al-Mu'mineen told me about it. He says, can you recite this poem for me? And he recited the same poem that was in the dream. That means that the Ahlul Bayt do their khas karam on their poets. But the shart, that is the condition, is that it must be in honor of the Ahlul Bayt. And this tradition we must continue. We must pass this on to the next generation. Whatever language you pick, but write in honor of the Ahlul Bayt. Try. Because we have a tradition from the 8th Imam, that when you write in our honor, the Imam says, when you write in our honor, the words don't come to you first. They come to us first and ask for permission. First, then they come to you. This Imam is telling us in our guidance. I was telling you, to complete what I was saying, the Arabs prided themselves on their language, but they said, our language is not more important than our Iman. They left from Arab and they went to Ajam. The Sadat, how did they end up in Ajam? They left, and many of them, 1 generation, 2 generations later, that language, their language was Arabic, it was no longer Arabic anymore, it was Farsi. The people who came from Iran, they ended up in the Indian subcontinent, they first spoke Farsi. The Mughals, what was their language? They spoke Turkish at home, that was their mother tongue, and in the courts they spoke Farsi. Urdu came much later. They, first generation, second generation, they spoke Farsi. Eventually they started speaking Urdu. The same thing's going to happen. This is the cycle of history. And what history is showing, we're going to have to start with Spanish and then furthermore other languages, French and the likes, and Japanese. The take-home message is encourage yourself and encourage your next generations to write in honor of Ahlul Bayt. If you can get the words and verses of Mir Hanis, Mirza Dabir and the poets of Urdu, that is beautiful. That's wonderful. If you can't, don't stop. No problem. Take what you understand from the Ahlul Bayt and write in whatever language you choose. But write in honor of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. This will help you here and this will help you in the akhirah. It will not just help you here, it will help in the akhirah. It is my sharaf to be able to recite some verses. If I'm going to talk about poetry, I might as well. The poet says, Mere khayal ko nisbat hui Madine se, Mere khayal ko nisbat hui Madine se, Mehak gulab ki aane lagi pasine se. मेरे ख्याल को निस्बत हुई मदीने से महक गुलाब की आने लगी पसीने से दुरूद भेजे मोहम्मद वाले अनीस बीना हुई जो चश्म तो नूरे खुदा कहा उक़दा खुला तो अक्ल ने मुश्किल कुशा कहा उक़दा खुला तो अक्ल ने मुश्किल कुशा कहा मकसद हुआ वसूल तो हाजत रवा कहा पाया दुरे मुराद तो बहरे सखा कहा पाया दुरे मुराद तो बहरे सखा कहा हम खुश हुए कि मध के दरिया बहा दिए हम खुश हुए कि मध के दरिया बहा दिए क्या बढ़ गया जो बहर में कतरे मिला दिए हम खुश हुए कि मध के दरिया बहा दिए क्या बढ़ गया जो बहर में कतरे मिला दिए दुरूद भेजे मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद मुझको दुनिया में कोई शख्स भी ऐसा न मिला मुझको दुनिया में कोई शख्स भी ऐसा न मिला जो ये कह सकता हो शब्बीर से मांगा न मिला मुझको दुनिया में कोई शख्स भी ऐसा न मिला जो ये कह सकता हो शब्बीर से मांगा न मिला और एक बार उनकी सखावत के मुताबिक मांगे एक बार उनकी सखावत के मुताबिक मांगे ऐसा मौला को कोई मांगने वाला न मिला ایک بار ان کی سخاوت کے مطابق مانگے. ایسا مولا کو کوئی مانگنے والا نہ ملا, ایسا مولا کو کوئی مانگنے والا نہ ملا. غدیر کا بھی ذکر ہوا تھا ابھی کچھ لمحے پہلے. شاعر عجیب مصرے کہتے ہیں کہ یہ مت کہیو بنائے جا رہے ہیں, یہ مت کہیو بنائے جا رہے ہیں, علی مولا دکھائے جا رہے ہیں. یہ مت کہیو بنائے جا رہے ہیں, علی مولا دکھائے جا رہے ہیں. اور فلک نیچے نظر آنے لگا ہے, فلک نیچے نظر آنے لگا ہے, علی اتنے اٹھائے جا رہے ہیں. یا علی یا علی, علی اتنے اٹھائے جا رہے ہیں. اور کہیں ہے بارش انوار رحمت, کہیں ہے بارش انوار رحمت, کہیں سینے جلائے جا رہے ہیں. کہیں ہے بارش انوار رحمت, کہیں سینے جلائے جا رہے ہیں. درود بھیجے محمد وآل محمد. عام طور پہ ہم امام سجاد کو بیمار امام کہتے ہیں اور لاچار امام کہتے ہیں, اور یہ سب صحیح اپنی جگہ پر ہے, اور 40 برس روئے, مگر امام نے بہت بڑا کارنامہ انجام فرمایا. کہ شاعر کہتے ہیں کہ آئے ہیں ابھی شام کا دربار الٹ کر, آئے ہیں ابھی شام کا دربار الٹ کر, اب عابد بیمار کو بیمار نہ کہنا. آئے ہیں ابھی شام کا دربار الٹ کر, اب عابد بیمار کو بیمار نہ کہنا. اور باب عظمت میں تیرے یہ ہے دلیل روشن, تیرا دشمن بھی تیرے حق میں بیان دیتا ہے. باب عظمت میں تیرے یہ ہے دلیل روشن, تیرا دشمن بھی تیرے حق میں بیان دیتا ہے. بوکلاہٹ تیرے خطبوں کے سبب تھی سجاد, ورنہ کافر بھی کہیں حکم آزاد دیتا ہے. بوکلاہٹ تیرے خطبوں کے سبب تھی سجاد, ورنہ کافر بھی کہیں حکم آزاد دیتا ہے. اور لٹ کے آباد ہے اب تک جو وہ گھر کس کا ہے, سب سے اونچا ہے جو کٹ کر بھی وہ سر کس کا ہے, سب سے اونچا ہے جو کٹ کر بھی وہ سر کس کا ہے. ظلم شبیر کی ہیبت سے نہ لرزے کیوں کر, ظلم شبیر کی ہیبت سے نہ لرزے کیوں کر. کس نبی کا ہے نواسا یہ پسر کس کا ہے, کس نبی کا ہے نواسا یہ پسر کس کا ہے. اور تخت والوں نے مورخ بھی خریدے ہوں گے, تخت والوں نے مورخ بھی خریدے ہوں گے, ذکر دنیا میں مگر شام و سحر کس کا ہے. تخت والوں نے مورخ بھی خریدے ہوں گے, ذکر دنیا میں مگر شام و سحر کس کا ہے. اور کس نے مقتل کی زمین چھو کے معلّہ کر دی, کس نے مقتل کی زمین چھو کے معلّہ کر دی. پوچھنا کرب بلا سے یہ ہنر کس کا ہے, پوچھنا کرب بلا سے یہ ہنر کس کا ہے. اور لاش اکبر پہ قضا سوچ رہی ہے اب تک, لاش اکبر پہ قضا سوچ رہی ہے اب تک. جس میں ٹوٹی ہے یہ برچی وہ جگر کس کا ہے, جس میں ٹوٹی ہے یہ برچی وہ جگر کس کا ہے. اور کون ہر شام غم شہ میں لہو روتا ہے, کون ہر شام غم شہ میں لہو روتا ہے. آسمانوں سے ادھر دیدہ تر کس کا ہے, آسمانوں سے ادھر دیدہ تر کس کا ہے. The Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, after Karbala, they recited much poetry. I mentioned Imam al-Hussein, he recited poetry on the plains of Karbala. Bibi Zainab recited poetry after Karbala. We are told when the family, when they got back after Karbala, Kufa, Sham, when they got to Medina, Imam Sajjad, before they entered Medina, he said Bashir, who was the person who was leading the Qafila, he said, I have heard that your father used to recite poetry. Do you write poetry as well? He said, Yabna Rasulullah, I try. He says, okay, we will wait here. I want you to tell the people of Medina that we have come, but tell them in poetry. At that point in time, Bashir, he went to Medina and he went and gathered all the people. And he said, Ya ahla Yathrib, la maqama lahum biha, qad qutila al-Husayn bi Karbala. He says, oh people of Yathrib, people of Medina, there is no place to live in Medina anymore. Why? قَدْ قُتِلَ الْحُسَيْنُ بِكَرْبَلَا. They have killed Hussein in Karbala. Ajrukum ala Allah. Ajrukum ala Allah. We're told that Bibi Zainab, before she entered into the city, she began to recite some poetry. And she said, Madinatu Jaddina la taqbalina. Madinatu Jaddina la taqbalina. What did Bibi Zainab say? Bibi Zainab said, O Medina of our grandfather Rasulullah, do not accept us. Do not allow us to come in. Why? Because when we left, we had Qasim, we had Ali Akbar, we had Abu Fadl al-Abbas, we had Hussein. Today we don't have anyone with us when we come back to you. Ajrukum ala Allah. Ajrukum ala Allah. We are told that at that point, one moment in time, that when the news reached, we are told on the 1st of Safar, the news reached, and the news reached to Medina. The person, the horseman, the messenger, he's given the message. When he's giving the message, he says that Hussein has been killed. When he says Hussein has been killed, one lady, she comes to the horseman and she says, what did you say? And he looked at her. He says, may Allah reward you for your children. She said, I didn't ask you about my children. Tell me about Hussein. She went further. He says, may Allah reward you for your son Abu Fadl al-Abbas. She said, I didn't ask you about Abu Fadl al-Abbas. She said, tell me about Hussein. The messenger said that قد قتل الحسين بكربلاء على ذبح الحسين بكربلاء. They have killed Hussein in Karbala. Who was it? It was Banin, the mother of Abu Fadl al-Abbas. She began to weep. Ajrukum ala Allah. Ajrukum ala Allah. Historians say that Bibi Banin, she said poetry when she heard about the musibah of Karbala. She went to the grave. She went to Jannatul Baqi, and they say she made 4 graves. And then she put one for each of her sons. And then she wiped them out. And she would say, Ya Hussein, Wa Hussein. And then she said some poetry. She says that I heard that there were 4 Haidari lions in Karbala, referring to her sons. And my son Abu Fadl al-Abbas, I heard his hands were cut. If Abu Fadl al-Abbas's hands were not cut, Hussein would not be killed. Banin, let me tell you what happened to Abu Fadl al-Abbas. We are told there's a moment in time when Abu Fadl al-Abbas, his hands were cut. He was swaying back and forth on the horse. Ajrukum ala Allah. He was swaying back and forth on the horse, and at some point in time he fell from the horse. Imam Hazrat Abbas, he came in the dream of a Zakir. The Zakir said that he recited the musibah of Abu Fadl al-Abbas, Hazrat Abbas. At that point in time, we are told that the Zakir, he saw Abu Fadl al-Abbas. Abu Fadl al-Abbas said, Zakir, why don't you recite my musibah? Why don't you tell people about my musibah? He says, Yabna Amir al-Mu'mineen, I tell them how you fell. I tell them about everything. I tell them about how there was an arrow in your eye. I tell them about how your hands were cut. I tell them. He says, you don't tell them exactly how I fell. He says, what Yabna Rasulullah? Yabna Amir al-Mu'mineen. He says, when someone falls from a horse, they have their hands to support them. He says, Ya Zakir, when I fell, I didn't have any hands. I had an arrow in my eye. I fell on the ground. The arrow came out the other way. He says the arrow came out the other way. Ajrukum ala Allah. Ajrukum ala Allah. Banin, your son Abu Fadl al-Abbas, he gave haqq wafa. He did everything he could. Don't blame him. We are told there's a moment in time, 300 years ago, Sayyid Mahdi Bahar al-Ulum, he was the marja of all the Shias. He took those people down to the dhari of Abu Fadl al-Abbas. When he took them down to the dhari of Abu Fadl al-Abbas, in the dhari, the mu'mineen who were doing the ziyarah 300 years ago, he said they looked at the grave of Abu Fadl al-Abbas. When they looked at the grave of Abu Fadl al-Abbas, they said, Agha, they said, Sayyid, we have a question. He said, what's the question? They said, we have heard that Abu Fadl al-Abbas was very tall. He was very strong. He says, why is his grave so small? Agha Sayyid Mahdi began to beat himself. he began to cry. He said he was very tall, he was very strong, but the enemy cut him into so many pieces. This is all we have left of Abu Fadl al-Abbas. This is all that we have left of Abu Fadl al-Abbas. Sallallahu alayka ya Rasul Allah. Sallallahu alayka ya Amir al-Mu'minin. Sallallahu alayki ya Fatimah al-Zahra Sayyidat al-Nisa al-Alameen. Sallallahu alayka ya Hasan al-Mujtaba. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين خصوصا سيدي ومولاي أبي الفضل العباس ابن أمير المؤمنين. معتم حسين يا حسين يا حسين.
عباس کی بہنوں نے نہ پائی چادر، ہائے 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 عباس کی بہنوں نے نہ پائی چادر، شام تک نیزے پہ دیتی تھی دہائی چادر، ہائے عباس کی بہنوں نے نہ پائی چادر، عباس کی بہنوں نے نہ پائی چادر، جس کے بابا نے اڑائی تھی ردا کعبے کو، جس کے بابا نے اڑائی تھی ردا کعبے کو، اس کی بیٹی کو کسی نے نہ اڑائی چادر، ہائے عباس کی بہنوں نے نہ پائی چادر، ہائے عباس کی بہنوں نے نہ پائی چادر، بس یہی کہتی تھی عباس کے سر سے زینب، بس یہی کہتی تھی عباس کے سر سے زینب، میرے بھائی میرے بھائی میرے بھائی چادر، ہائے عباس کی بہنوں نے نہ پائی چادر، ہائے عباس کی بہنوں نے نہ پائی چادر، شرم سے چھپ گئی سجاد کے پیچھے زینب، شرم سے چھپ گئی سجاد کے پیچھے زینب، ہند زندہ میں جو اوڑھے ہوئے آئی چادر، ہائے عباس کی بہنوں نے نہ پائی چادر، ہائے عباس کی بہنوں نے نہ پائی چادر، پاؤں خط دیتے رہے دور تلک بچی کے، پاؤں خط دیتے رہے دور تلک بچی کے، شمر نے ایسے سکینہ سے چھڑائی چادر، ہائے عباس کی بہنوں نے نہ پائی چادر، ہائے عباس کی بہنوں نے نہ پائی چادر، گر پڑی خاک پہ عباس کی ماں صدمے سے، گر پڑی خاک پہ عباس کی ماں صدمے سے، اپنے بازو سے جو زینب نے ہٹائی چادر، ہائے عباس کی بہنوں نے نہ پائی 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 چادر، شام تک نیزے پہ دیتی تھی دہائی چادر، ہائے عباس کی بہنوں نے نہ پائی چادر، یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین،
اے میرے عباس، اے میرے عباس، اے میرے عباس، اے میرے عباس، جب ردا سے چھنی میں صدا دیتی رہی، تو نہ آیا غازی، جب ردا سے چھنی میں صدا دیتی رہی، تو نہ آیا غازی، جب ردا سے چھنی میں صدا دیتی رہی، تو نہ آیا غازی، آل عمران نے کہا اور زندان نے کہا، یہ بہن قید ہوئی، تو نہ آیا غازی، جب ردا سے چھنی میں صدا دیتی رہی، تو نہ آیا غازی، ہم کو پانی نہ ملے تیری خوشبو تو رہے، تیرے بازو نہ کٹے چاہے مشکی زاچ دے، یہ مگر ہو نہ سکا تیرے بازو ہے جدا، مجھ پہ ہے تشنا لبی، تو نہ آیا غازی، جب ردا سے چھنی
میں صدا دیتی
رہی، تو نہ آیا غازی، دھوپ میں تو تھا شجر تجھ سے آباد تھا گئے، ہائے برہنا میرا سے، ہائے برہنا میرا سے، کیا نہیں تجھ کو خبر، اے علمدار وفا، اس بہن کو باخدا تجھ سے دھرستی بڑی، تو نہ آیا غازی، جب ردا سے چھنی میں صدا دیتی رہی، تو نہ آیا غازی، قید خانے میں قضا جب سکینہ کو ملی، قید خانے میں قضا جب سکینہ کو ملی، دیکھ کرتے کا کفن بچی دفنائی گئی، اس گھڑی نام تیرا صورت ناد علی، دکھ میں دہراتی رہی، تو نہ آیا غازی، جب ردا سے چھنی میں صدا دیتی رہی، تو کر کے یہ بات رقم خون میں ڈوب گیا میرے غازی کا علم زخمی زینا کا جگر خون فشاں شاہ کسے آئے خیموں میں شقی تو نایا غازی جبر دا سے چھنی میں صدا دیتی رہی تو نایا
السلام عليك يا رسول الله المصطفى محمد بن عبد الله. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين المرتضى علي بن أبي طالب. السلام عليك يا فاطمة بنت محمد الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن بن علي المجتبى. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين الشهيد. السلام عليك يا أبا الفضل العباس بن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا شهداء كربلاء وسيران كربلاء ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا علي بن الحسين الزين العابدين. السلام عليك يا محمد بن علي الباقر. السلام عليك يا جعفر بن محمد الصادق. السلام عليك يا موسى بن جعفر القاظم. السلام عليك يا علي بن موسى الرضا. السلام عليك يا محمد بن علي التقي. السلام عليك يا علي بن محمد النقي. السلام عليك يا حسن بن علي العسكري. السلام عليك يا إمام ذاهب الأسر والزمان على أمان على أمان على أمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. أجل الله تعالى فرجه وساحر الله مخرجه. السلام عليك يا سيدي ابن الزهراء ورحمة الله وبركاته.
مومن مومنات یہ اعلان بھی سماعت فرما لیں. کمنگ فرائیڈے اکتوبر 11 کو شب بیداری کا انعقاد کیا گیا ہے. اس شب بیداری میں پاکستان سے رضا عباس زیدی صاحب جو وہ تشریف لا رہے ہیں نوخانی کے لیے, اور علی کاظمی اور ہوسٹ نوح خان یہاں پر موجود ہوں گے. وہ آپ کے سامنے نوح خانی اور سینہ زنی کریں گے. پروگرام اس طریقے سے 8 بجے جو نیاز کھلائی جائے گی, اس کے فوراً بعد مجلس شروع کر دی جائے گی. تمام مومن اور مومنات سے شرکت کی درخواست ہے. بر محمد و آل محمد صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم.